Welcome to the Explainer. If you just glance at the top-level macroeconomic data right now, the U.S. economy looks, well, practically unstoppable, right? Huge aggregate employment numbers, high labor demand. But if you actually talk to everyday American families, you are going to hear a wildly different story. You hear about total exhaustion, shrinking bank accounts, and this constant low-level panic about just paying the bills. So today, we're diving into the official data to peel back the layers of what we're calling the economic mirage, to see what's literally going on with the American worker. And it all really boils down to one fundamental question. If we're working harder and producing way more as a nation, why does it feel like we have less? Take a second and just think about that. It is the central paradox of the modern US economy. And honestly, it carries an enormous emotional weight for millions of households who are doing absolutely everything right, but are somehow still falling behind. So let's look at this contrast. The economic mirage is the stuff making headlines, nominal wage growth, and robust aggregate employment. It paints a picture of this thriving, invincible workforce. But then you have the economic reality, the lived, everyday experience of working and middle-class households. We're talking about seriously eroding financial security and the rising, frankly, unavoidable necessity of working multiple jobs just to keep your head above water. It's really a tale of two economies. And to figure out why they're so disconnected, we first got to look at how much we are actually working. Which brings us to Section 1, the truth about working hours. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics will often report an aggregate average work week of around 34.3 hours for private non-farm payrolls. Sounds pretty manageable, right? Almost like a lighter labor burden. But here's the catch. That number is kind of a statistical illusion. See, the BLS calculates this by dividing total aggregate hours by total jobs. That means they are blending full-time jobs with millions of part-time roles, especially given the massive explosion in service industry gigs like retail and hospitality. This math artificially pulls the average way down. It completely masks the grueling, extended schedules of a massive group of workers who are pushing well past standard limits. And what about the people who literally cannot survive on just one income stream? Well, as of mid-2026, 5.3% of the entire workforce holds down multiple jobs. Now, here is the crucial takeaway. Historically, grabbing a second job was often a choice, right? Maybe to save up for a summer vacation or to learn a new skill. Today, it's a structural necessity. It's an essential survival mechanism driven by intense financial pressure just to offset stagnant real wages. All right, moving on to Section 2, the Great Wage Decoupling. To really understand how we got here, we have to travel back to the 1970s. We need to define something called the compensation productivity gap. After World War II, worker pay and productivity basically grew hand in hand. When workers generated more wealth by being more efficient, their purchasing power went up right alongside it. It was a deal. But in the 1970s, that marriage officially ended. The compensation productivity gap is basically this macroeconomic divergence where your purchasing power completely stops keeping pace with the actual economic output you're producing every hour. If you track the decade since the 70s, you see exactly what went wrong. While labor productivity absolutely skyrocketed, real hourly compensation growth just painfully lagged behind. Why did this happen? Well, it's mostly due to two massive structural shifts. First, the cost of critical, non-negotiable goods that families need, think housing and healthcare, inflated way faster than the prices of domestically produced output. And second, we saw a long-term, steady decline in the labor share of GDP. Simply put, corporate profits and capital returns started taking a much bigger slice of the pie, blocking workers from capturing the very economic growth they were generating. And that leads right into Section 3, the cost of living squeeze. Let's zero in on the single heaviest weight on the modern household budget: housing. Census Bureau data shows a relentless march upward. Between the 2015 to 2019 period and the 2020 to 2024 period, national median gross rent took a massive jump in real dollars across almost all U.S. counties. By 2023, this housing squeeze forced over 21 million renter households into being severely cost-burdened. That means they're spending more than 30% of their total income, literally, just to keep a roof over their heads. Which brings us to this staggering number, $1,579. That was the national median asking rent for vacant units in the first quarter of 2026. We really have to ground these macroeconomic trends in actual reality. When real median household income has basically gone nowhere for the last 5 years, dropping a nearly $1,600 rent bill on a household every single month, that acts like a vice grip on working class families. Next up, Section 4, a state of financial fragility. So when we look at the Federal Reserve survey of household economics and decision-making, it reveals an incredibly fragile safety net. Get this. Only 63% of adults say they could cover a hypothetical $400 unexpected expense using cash or its equivalent. That leaves nearly 4 in 10 Americans, 37%, who cannot easily handle a totally minor emergency, a blown tire, a broken fridge, without having to borrow money, sell something, or just outright fail to pay it. And this level of fragility leads to some truly heartbreaking compromises. 26% of adults, that is more than a quarter of the population, actually skipped necessary medical care in the prior year simply because they couldn't afford it. When your budget is stretched this incredibly thin, personal health is almost always the first thing on the chopping block just to make ends meet. But even with those massive sacrifices, it's often still not enough. Nearly a quarter of renters, 23%, reported falling behind on their rent at some point in the past year. This kicks off a really dangerous cycle. To keep from drowning, people experiencing this kind of difficulty are pushed into higher credit card balances or those tricky buy now, pay later traps, and those frequently trigger overdraft fees, effectively punishing the very people who can least afford it. Finally, Section 5, the human cost of work. Behind every single one of these statistics is a real person, and the physical and mental toll of all this economic pressure has morphed into a literal public health crisis. The U.S. Surgeon General Vice Admiral Vivek Murthy has actually issued an urgent warning about this. He notes that chronic financial worry, incredibly heavy workloads, long commutes, and juggling multiple jobs, it is severely deteriorating workers' health. This chronic stress basically traps us in a fight-or-flight state. It wrecks our sleep, spikes the risk of chronic diseases, and really fuels mental health challenges. Dr. Murthy points out this fascinating yet totally tragic irony. He says, when the mental health of workers suffers, so does workplace productivity, creativity, and retention. This constant, grinding stress driven by financial insecurity doesn't just hurt the individual. It ultimately chips away at the exact productivity that our whole economic model depends on to function. We're essentially burning the engine just to heat the car. So that leaves us with one final lingering thought. If our economy completely relies on record productivity, what exactly happens when the workers powering it have absolutely nothing left to give? The data is crystal clear. Americans are working longer, we're producing way more, and yet we're holding on to less. It's a systemic problem, and it demands our attention. Because an economic model that demands absolutely everything from you while giving you less in return, that isn't just an economic mirage. It's completely unsustainable. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it gave you a clear, if a bit sobering picture of the American worker's reality today.